Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief. I am Chris DeSantis. I am joined by Milwaukee's best, Eric Weichen. Eric, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for recognizing.
Would you say you're Milwaukee's best or you're Milwaukee's best light?
I probably would. I would lean towards the beast.
Right.
Yeah.
Full beast. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of beasts, Joel Rawlings could not join us. He apparently needs 48 hours to pack to go to Hawaii. So everybody pour a tear out. He's going to be traveling over there to finally settle the debate. What is better, Kona or Kauai coffee? I don't know if you have an opinion, Eric, or maybe you're more of a Jamaican Blue Mountain guy when it comes to extremely expensive coffee.
I'm more of an African origin coffee guy.
Okay, you're not into the Hawaiian coffee. It's not for you.
No, it's a lot of fluff.
I fell in love with it for a while after my honeymoon in Hawaii. Then I bought some on my most recent vacation. I was also on vacation last week. That's why we're coming out with this a little bit late. And I tasted it and I was like, why did I like this?
Exactly. You had an experience there that you connected to the coffee versus actually good coffee. It's not to say you can't have good coffee from Hawaii. It's just that there are so many other opportunities and options out there. So any swim coach that runs into me at a swim meet, you want to talk coffee, let me know. We're not going to have an hour-long pod on that, but
that's one where I actually wouldn't make fun of you, unlike the punk references that you promised not to make on this one. If you started making coffee recommendations, I'm actually interested in that. So I wouldn't be.
I've got one relatively close to you if you end up in Philadelphia for swim meets. So
what's that?
Elixir.
Okay.
LEIXR maybe. Coffee roaster. Yeah, good stuff.
I do get my coffee delivered from a Philadelphia company. La Colombe delivers coffee. And that's a switch I made in the pandemic that I'm very happy with, by the way, for anyone who's looking for a quick coffee recommendation. Anyway, aside from coffee and on to topics with swimming. So today, I just want to, for people who listen to the last podcast, you're probably expecting us to come on and discuss more rules of the game because that's what we promised. Obviously, one reason we don't want to do that is that Joel's not here. Another reason we don't want to do that is that the waters have gotten a little bit muddy around these articles. I got contacted by somebody, let's call him a friend of the pod, who was not pleased about the articles in the context of that he thought he or the organization he had presented some materials at should have gotten some attribution in this article. I have spoken briefly over email to Juka, and I still plan on bringing Juka onto the podcast at some point. But we're just sorting out a few details with all of this. And what I thought it might be good for us to discuss for a few minutes here, and then we're going to get into some job hiring news and break down some job postings, because I gotten a lot of good feedback from people, so they really like that here on the pod, is what kind of responsibility people have for attribution in the world of swimming. And I'll just put it like this. I think, you run into a lot of people, if you're a coach, if you're out there sharing ideas and talking to people, run into a lot of people who go, what's great about the world of swimming is that, the best people are out there and they're sharing their stuff, and you can, everybody's sharing, and you can take it and you can run with it. And, I hear that a lot, right? And then I speak to somebody, and, the person I spoke to was like, hey, this is something that I devoted years of my life to building knowledge on. So to have somebody else talk about it. And I think the thing that he was really upset about was he thought Juka had gotten a lot of it wrong. So that's like the whole nother level that we have to sort out. So like, hey, I've done all this work to try to come up with something original, and now somebody else has used my terminology to describe it to people in a way that I think is wrong. And so now when I'll bring it out into the fold, people will go, oh, I heard about that before. But what they'll have in their mind as I heard about that before is wrong in my perception. So it did change my perspective on that a little bit. And I guess I want to open up the floor to you, Eric. How, what do you think about attribution and idea sharing in coaching swimming? What kind of responsibilities do people have in this respect?
Everybody and anybody who shares an idea that's not original, it's always the best course of action is to share the source, because the last thing you want is to burn a bridge, with the person who actually was the source. It also is good from a standpoint of there's a lot of our coaching history is an oral history.
Yeah.
So, a lot of young coaches will be getting ideas from their head coaches or a lead coach or whatever that might be on the internet. And then sharing that information where it came from keeps some of that stuff going, which I didn't even really think about it until as soon as the moment you asked that question. It's like, oh, just thinking about all of the stuff that we've had in the past and not the whole Eric that 10 1000s on 10 minutes or 30 1000s or whatever the sets were, not that, but just like the actual ideas of where certain things came from, the idea of an actual series of drills or a set progression or something like that, or just how you would approach a conversation with an athlete. It's best to be able to share those people because that person may actually be open to talking to that young coach. Right? If you share that person's name and they're a very open coach, that you may be able to reach out to them and connect with them. I've had it a couple of times where I've reached out to a coach, not thinking that I would ever hear from them. And then all of a sudden, within 48 to 72 hours, I either have a voicemail or an email from that coach willing to share. So, but then it's an honesty thing. It's an academic thing. Now, I don't know, give or take whatever it is, some of the backgrounds of some of our colleagues out there in the world. If you don't have an understanding of the academic world, you got to cite your sources. It's how you have credibility. It's how you build a foundation for like a study. Like you have all of these references, and then you're creating your own study, and then you go from there, and then your results are for that specific study based on the references. So if you at all have a background in science as a coach, you have an obligation to continue that honesty in your work. So,
well, I think probably if you have a high school education, you've cited your work at some point.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily even need to be an academic to do some of this stuff. I do think you make some good points. I just want to follow up on. I think I would gather that one of the reasons you probably got those surprising, as you described them, surprising replies is there's such a different context to reaching out to somebody where you might just go like reach out very vaguely and just say like, hey, I really want to pick your brain, right? Versus like, here's a specific idea I have heard about. It was attributed to you. I wonder if I could learn more about that thing. Now, if that's something that the person actually did some work in, they probably are very interested in talking to somebody about it, because for some of the same reasons that I said is that, they want to make sure people are sort of understanding it right. They've put a lot of time and life energy into something. I know one of the things that I've gotten frustrated with as I'm out in the swimming community talking about positive psychology related topics is, I will bring up a topic and I will try to describe it to somebody and they'll go, oh yeah, it's just like this. In my mind, I'm thinking, not at all like that. Not at all. Not at all. And then I'm like, how do I approach the next step of this conversation? Because I don't want to come off like some like imperious dickhead who's like, you don't understand, man, but at the same time, I don't want somebody thinking that's what I told them. because it's not. And so there's a lot in that. And it's actually, this whole thing has made me a bit more self-conscious too, in saying, like, when I talk about, for instance, positive psychology topics, am I doing a good enough job citing my own sources for that stuff? It's very pertinent for me. Again, I'm getting prepared to give this talk in Denmark. And now I'm like, okay, right off the top, I'm just going to let people know all the sources that contributed to the information that I'm about to present, because I want people to also be able to, if they want to do their own, they want to do their own research, right? They want to do their own level of engagement that doesn't involve me afterwards. I want to be able to point them where to go to sort of get a deeper into something. Any other thoughts on this before we move on to the coaching carousel?
Not this specifically, but it does remind me of time when I was a member of the Coaches Idea Exchange page.
Oh no.
And
I'm so sorry that it brings back those memories for you.
Most recently, when it comes to on SwimSwam, where they have these workouts that are posted, right? Where there's really no explanation for some of the stuff, and then you ask the questions, and then the answers either don't come or they don't make sense or whatever it is. I think a lot of times we're just not, just it's kind of in general, like there's just a lack, for some way or another, there's a lack of, I don't know if it's wanting to share those specific pieces or putting themselves out there, or if it's for fear of being found out as a fraud. So you just like sometimes are a little bit holding back. I'm just trying to find a reason for somebody not to cite a source other than to make themselves feel, or just capitalize on somebody else's work.
Well, I think sometimes too it can be lazy, although I do think there's a dichotomy here that you hint at with some of those exchanges that you had. I mean, for instance, I feel like sometimes we, especially myself and Joel, we name drop Milton Elms. Part of that is we're trying to cite our sources when we're talking about something that he's spoken onto us, because he's a very knowledgeable person. But I would say I get a lot of people who, if I mention that association, they go like, oh, tell me, like, give me some like real takeaway ideas. And I'm always like, I don't understand most of what he says. I don't. Like, I talk to him semi-frequently, and sometimes, very often, he will say something to me and I'll just go, I'll either say it or I'll say it alone in my head. I'll go, I don't really understand that. And I think that there are some people that people end up in a lot of situations where sometimes that is what's going on. They have heard something, they don't really understand it, and they go, okay, I'm not going to talk about this because I don't want to be found out, that this thing that I supposedly know about, because it is like, it's another layer of knowledge, right? There's one thing, I feel like there's hearing something, then there's hearing and understanding it, and then there's hearing and understanding it and being able to explain it to another person. So I have all these ideas where sometimes I'm just at the hearing stage, sometimes I'm hearing and understanding. Almost nothing that he says can I explain to another person. I cannot do it.
Yeah.
But I think that there's plenty of situations where people go like, wow, this is gold. This is really valuable stuff. And I could really do something with this. And they just sort of take it and run with it. And they're thinking that same way about a workout too. And then when they actually get a critical question that goes, hey, this workout doesn't make any sense because XYZ, they go, shoot, I don't actually know what I'm talking about. I just know this is a good practice.
Yeah.
Right?
I made this set, and I found this set and I tweaked it, and then the person
I think
who
it's really good. Yeah.
And the person who wrote it is like, this is what you're doing is not what the set was implied for. So your tweaks completely changed the scope of what we're doing right now.
Right. So anyway, I think, this is not anybody who's listening to this. I'm not like accusing Juka of all sorts of stuff. I'm genuinely, honestly going to talk with him and probably bring him on the podcast and ask him some of these questions, because it could be a matter of just like forgot, or maybe he's going to come on and say, you know what, this is all my stuff, and let me show you the research that I've been doing. Let me show my work, basically. And I'm open to that as well. And I think we'll have an interesting conversation about it.
Because it is possible in some senses that the same thing is being discovered in parallel to each other. Not to say this isn't or is the case with what we read on SwimSwam, but there are a number of things in humankind history where things have been developed in other places. So I'm curious to hear what you get back from him and where it goes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about the big hire right off the bat. We discussed the Pitt job opening, and by many accounts, Pitt swung for the fences and hit. They got the assistant coach from the recently crowned national champion Cal Bears, Chase Kreitler, to be their next head coach. What's your initial impression of that hire?
Well, I do have, well, not anymore, I guess, but I did have a conflict of interest. He was a Speedo team, was a Speedo coach. I had a couple of times where I had the opportunity to
John Hargis was.
No. With Chase.
Oh, Chase was. Okay.
Yeah, with Chase. So Chase being at Cal and Cal being a Speedo team.
Got it.
Whether it was at they had Pac-12s here in Houston, and was able to talk to him directly there, and being able to see him at national level meets, being in Austin at juniors this last winter, and just being able to sit next to him and just talk shop. He's a very engaging young coach, and he's very enthusiastic about the job, and definitely a sound listener. He's just not waited to speak, but just waited for you to finish and then respond in kind. So I've had several positive experiences with him. The reality is he was at Cal, and I'm sure Coach Durden gave him plenty of opportunities to be the lead coach at meets too. I just remember last summer him, being there at what would be Speedo championships in Irvine, and being on an island there and just taking care of the guys that were there. So he certainly has done his fair share of his own work at the team, and to have the connection to Seliskar during his time there is definitely a very positive thing, especially looking at the athlete that he was. So I'm excited for him. I think they got a great coach. I don't know any of the other finalists or anybody else that they were considering, but if you're getting somebody who's on the upswing, he's a young coach, he's just starting a family. If he likes Pitt, that's a really great thing, because he's got a baby. So it's it's a fun city. There's a lot going on.
Trying to put down roots. Yeah.
So it's I think he's had experiences otherwhere. I don't know what he's going to be going from being an assistant at a major program, which there was plenty of stuff he had to do there, to now a combined program, and he's the head guy. And so I'm assuming he had some dialogue with Durden as far as like what to expect as a head coach from an admin perspective, but now it's men and women. So my guess would be he's got a few phone calls into Todd DeSorbo about that transition from associate head to a head coach for a combined program, and he'll be able to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, so I think a few things, and if we're talking about citing, I actually think SwimSwam has a number of very good articles about this hire. And one of them, I think, came out of a comment that they got. So if we're, citing our tree all the way back, I'll get cited back to the comment. I don't remember the commenter's name, but if you're an anonymous commenter, I don't think we need to remember your name. Anyway, one thing this hire tells me is that the absolute best job to have in terms of assistant coaching job, in terms of your future career prospects, is the assistant coach at Cal men's swimming team. Because the last 3 assistant coaches Durden has had have gone on to power conference head coaching jobs. And Meehan, by all accounts, thriving at Stanford. Sugiyama is signed, we just learned, through 2027 at Wisconsin. So they love what he's doing there. And now Chase Kreitler has gotten this job at Pitt. And so I think, I give some credit to SwimSlam for that, some credit to Dave Durden, because obviously he is doing some things that make it a good job. And that's something I really care about. So I'm excited to see that there's, a head coach who's not only winning, but he's also doing a good job preparing his assistant coaches to have a good career prospects in the sport of swimming. So I think that's very impressive. The other piece of this reporting that I found really interesting was the fact that they said, they guesstimated that Kreitler was getting paid about $175,000, which is sort of a standard Power 5 conference starter head coaching salary at this point. So it's in line, I would say. And then that he has $320,000 to spend on assistant coaches. And that's like, in my mind, also actually a pretty good budget. If you think that you can hire up to 5 coaches, you don't necessarily need to hire 5 coaches, or maybe you do. I don't know, how rigid the athletic administration would do this, but he's got some money to throw around in terms of building a staff there at Pitt. And I'll be curious to see what he does in terms of filling out those 5 applications. Of course, it could, we've seen in some of these transitions last year that some coaches are retained from previous staff. So some of those people could be from Hargis' staff, but you would assume that at least some of them are from outside. So he's got his, beyond his own recruiting of athletes, he's got to hit the ground running here in terms of recruiting of coaches. And we're going to see some ripples of movement based off of that.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see who he ends up with, because, you could only assume based on, it's hard to say, I don't want to assume, but
that's what we're here to do, is make assumptions.
But just based upon, what we see as far as his progression to where he is, and given his age, he's going to have to hire somebody older than him.
For sure.
Right. There's going to be a thing where he's going to have assistants who are older than him, and, that has to be okay with it, with him internally, and that person that's coming in, they have to be okay with having a head coach that is going to be younger than them. And, the egos are all going to have to be set aside, because he can't just hire a bunch of, fresh out of undergrad people to run that team.
If he only hired people that were younger than him, the pool would be very small and very young.
Yeah. And that pool deck would be a lot of running and jumping and probably, somersaults and stuff like that. But
Bobby Gunturo Jr. Would you need to find that guy?
But I think it'll be, I am curious to see how this staff takes shape, because there are a good number of young coaches out there that are worth bringing in. There are a fair number of coaches at mid-major schools or D2 or D3 that might be, in the area looking to move up. There are plenty of teams and schools in and around Pittsburgh right now as it is. So it will be interesting to see how it all pans out, where the direction you go with diving. Because you either, you really go one or two ways. You either have it because you have to have it, or you have it and it's like you are trying to make a big push with the diving side. I don't know the diving landscape in the Pennsylvania area or within, necessarily within the few states around it, and how you could pull from that. I don't know if you have any idea how good diving is in and around here.
Traditionally, Pitt's diving has been pretty good. Certainly
maybe that's the retention that he has is
stronger.
The dive coach. It's probably easiest to be like,
if you have a good dive coach, you hold on for dear life. It seems like that. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things you make me think of with the hiring discussion is, and people who listen to this podcast know that I know Ryan Wakamerka. I will tell a story about him that I don't really know if it's true, but I heard it, and I didn't hear it from him. And that was when he was building his staff in the offseason. One of the people that he hired to be an assistant coach for him there was Mike Simpson, who was a former Division I head coach. And I would gather he's probably 20 years older than Ryan. And that what I heard was that it was a very purposeful move that Ryan said, okay, as I'm building this coaching staff, I need one person who really is like, could easily like this be the head coach of the team. And just like, if I need to put my attention somewhere else, this person knows exactly how to keep all the cogs of this running. And I think there's a lot of value in situations like that. And certainly there's some people probably with head coaching experience who would be interested in being an assistant coach at Pitt, maybe for a little bit more than the average of 320 divided by 5. And if you have that flexibility to play around with that, be a really nice asset to have in terms of building a coaching staff.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. It makes complete sense to be able to have somebody who's been there, done that, not worried about, they don't want the head coach lifestyle, like you said.
Right.
They want to be able to be on deck and coach the kids and have fun, but then not have to go to any of the compliance meetings or any of that, but at the same time, as a young head coach, you want somebody to be like, he's got a brand new baby. It's going to be like, there might be a time where he can't be there for whatever reason. And he needs that head coach to be able to go and walk into a compliance meeting and not be in over their head.
Right.
So, and we've seen with some of these staff developments, and I know you and I and Joel have spoken to, what is the quote unquote diversity of the staff going to be like? Are we going to get nice guy but don't know anything about him, but it's like, are we going to have the one female coach that every Power 5 conference team has?
The unofficial affirmative action for young women in
or
in Division
are we going to see something different? And it's not to say that he's going to be one of those guys and have that one female coach. Maybe he's just going to hire the best 4 or 5 people available. That's what you'd like to think with any coach. He's going to hire the best 4 or 5. And if it happens to be all women, then that would be unprecedented. And if it happens to be one, then, the other coaches have got to be fantastic coaches. I am certainly curious. I am also, just to play with it. You talk about Durden's coaching tree. Where do you think the current assistant at Cal Men's, where do you think he's going to land after this experience?
Dave Marsh,
yeah. Do you think he's got a chance to take this experience and leapfrog to something great? Because I haven't really heard much from this guy. So,
he showed a lot of promise this season. I think he's certainly capable of being a Division I head coach at some point. If he keeps working hard and studying hard and, eating his Wheaties and that kind of thing. No, I mean, from all I've heard, and again, this is just all rumor and hearsay. A lot of people have told me that Dave Marsh is at a point in his career where he simply doesn't really want to be a head coach of a college team. And he probably would never say that publicly because you never want to, You don't want to be at a job. You don't want to change your mind and be at a job interview and have people go, yeah, so remember when you said you didn't want to do this job anymore? What changed, right? So, I don't want to get too deep into that, but I think maybe he might be the best example of what we just talked about, which is somebody who, has had arguably the best NCAA coaching career. He's up there in the top 5 of all time. So, he can run a combined Division I program, and maybe he's just not interested in doing it full time anymore. He's in his 60s. He's just wants to be a part of something really good and coach some professional athletes, as he's been doing for quite some time now. And Cal might just be the right place for him to do that. I think if you've got your sort of, if you can be honest about what you want, both as the head coach and the assistant coach, and all of that works together, then great. So I see him staying there for the foreseeable future, and that being really formidable for everybody else.
Be curious to see if we saw Maggie McNeil going to Cal after her time in Michigan. Is having somebody like Marsh for the foreseeable future, does that really change the scope of grad transfers? Because you can't be on Cal's pro team without being a Cal swimmer. So does that change things? Because a lot of people like what Dave Marsh does. He is probably the king of flexibility when it comes to whatever time period he has to help an athlete get to where he needs. He's shown that.
Yeah.
So maybe this is certainly something that is going to, I don't know how much of a change it's going to have in terms of people trying to transfer. There's only 9.9 scholarships at Cal, and I don't think they're on the list of teams that is going to start shelling out money for academic performance. I mean, It certainly is. If they have the money to do so, it would really make it an awesome place to be an undergrad who might not be able to get money, because it's not cheap to go there. But if you're from California, you want to swim at Cal, and you have the opportunity to be a walk-on, you might be able to get close to $6,000 a year academically if your grades are worth it. And having guys on your team that are really good at school really helps, because not that swimming isn't already kind of in that category of great athletes and great academically, but it's always great to have walk-ons who are going 4.0 in multiple degrees, and just helps boost that team GPA. It makes everything look good to your admin, so you can keep your job, because people are graduating and they're going on to big things. So
yeah, and I think one last thing on this, as I thought about as we were talking, is this also not, if we talk about Durden and his staff construction, this is also not the first time that he's sort of pulled a rabbit out of his hat in this respect. You can remember the early years when he was coaching at Cal and things went incredibly well. He had North Thornton, their former coach, as the world's most overqualified volunteer coach, working there. And so he seems to find a ways to cheat the system in terms of having a really good coaching staff. And I think that's going to pan out for him. Okay, let's transition. Let's talk through, we're, as I said, we've gotten some good feedback on coaching opportunities, breaking down job postings. So we have one American white bread job posting, and then we're going to do a Danish one because somebody sent it to me. And by the way, if you have a job posting you'd like us to look at here on the podcast, something you'd like to sort of have gone over, you can message me on some form of social media and see if it penetrates. Until Eric sets up the official Swim Brief email address, that's how we're going to have to do it.
Yeah, I should probably do that.
Yeah, you would be the only one I would trust to check it, so it's going to have to be you. So first up, Jake Schrum left Towson, Maryland to Towson University. It's in Towson, Maryland, to coach UVA. And so now Towson University needs a head coach. If I read the job summary here, Towson is a top 100 public university. I'm guessing that's the US News and World Report rankings that seem to kind of dominate these things. Let's see what you're responsible for. Organizing everything, leadership, adhering to all the university NCAA conference rules, budgets, equipment, travel advances, and being the boss to assistant coaches. What are they looking for? Somebody with a bachelor's degree, 3 years of experience. You can recruit at the Division I level, and you can do the job, essentially, that they've put in there. Preferred qualifications, master's degree, knowledge of Maryland swimming. Here's an interesting piece. Competitive salary, full university benefits that includes 22 days of annual leave, up to 14 holidays, personal and sick days. I'm not sure if that's included in the 22 days of annual leave. Excellent health, life, and retirement plans, and tuition remission. So, Eric, what do you think about being the head coach at Towson University based on that job description?
What is competitive salary? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Competitive.
Okay, so competitive with what? I do think you bring up a good point here, which is I understand the arguments for job postings not wanting to put a salary range on there on a posting. I just don't agree with them. I know you're going, well, we don't want to, commit ourselves, I guess, to some, but you have a range, and it's going to be make or break for a lot of the candidates, whether or not they apply. So why not?
And this is time of the year. It's end of April. Like, people don't have time to jack around and go through the hoops of all different interviews and this application window, which ends essentially right around here, the end of the semester, or maybe during dead week. So by not listing it, coaches are going to apply, but they have no idea. So what is competitive? Competitive for the area, competitive for a mid-major university, competitive, I don't know, but yeah, post it. What's the worst that could happen? I guess if it's a public university, somebody can dig and
find out.
And at that point, just post it.
Right.
Other than that, it is kind of funny where knowledge of Maryland swimming. Is there a test?
You have to be able to pass the Maryland swimming exam. Now it's open book. And
Katie Ledecky,
yeah. What is NCAP? What is Rockville Montgomery Swim Club? No, I mean, I do think that probably a downside of some of these university job postings is it's clear that a lot of it was written probably by somebody in the human resources department who has absolutely no idea of the landscape that they're that they're writing to. They don't know what their audience is, right?
And so I 100% agree with you, because if you are motivated, innovative, and team oriented, we would love to hear from you.
That's it. That's all you need. And 3 years of coaching experience. I can also gather that there will be a bunch of naive people with 3 years of coaching experience, a bachelor's degree, that are highly motivated, that will send their application into the trash chute of Towson, Maryland, and receive no response. So, and they could do a better job of letting people know what exactly it is they're looking for. I would gather probably what they are looking for is somebody that is an assistant coach at a Power 5 conference school, or a head coach of a mid-major program that, views Towson as a step up. They had scorers at NCAAs last year. So certainly they're one of the best mid-major programs in that respect for anybody to come work at. I would assume a relatively high cost of living, which is why I think it's important that you're bringing up the competitive salary, because, I think anybody that's applying for a job has to do the math. You could even have a flashy number on there. Let's say maybe I've seen job postings this sort of cycle where people go like, this is a 6-figure coaching job. Yeah. In an area where it costs $600,000 to buy 1,000 square foot home. Doesn't look as good to get paid 6 figures when that's the case, right? So, people have to be able to do that calculation. And I think actually it's in their interest to inform people, because the last thing you want is somebody who takes the job, thinks that the salary figure looks pretty good, and then gets to the reality of trying to find a place to live, and it's incredibly stressful for them. They can't find what they're looking for, and they're thinking, oh, I'm actually not getting paid nearly enough to do this job.
You're going to end up in a spare room.
Yeah. And, then they're gone in a year or two because they just can't sustain the lifestyle. People, I think too, there's a point to be made that even a lesser candidate who will stay for longer is better than, somebody who's a little bit better, but may only be there for 1 or 2 years. And then you have to do another job search, another sort of transition of everything. I do think this job is, traditionally it's been a pretty good mid-major job to do. So I would expect that they're going to get some solid interest in it.
Yeah. According to Zillow.com.
You're looking at Zillow live.
Typical home value of homes in Towson is $438,000.
Okay, so it's a fairly expensive place to live. Yeah.
I
was expected in the Northeast.
You're going to be renting a room.
Yeah. Well, depending on how much money you make, but another way you could do the math if you're reading this job description. I would assume that Jake Schrum has not taken a massive pay cut to be in. I could see him maybe taking less money to coach at UVA because he gets the value for his future sort of coaching prospects out of it. But I can't see him, taking more than maybe 15 or 20% less. So figure out what UVA assistant coaches make and add 20% to that. That's probably the high end for whatever it is to be the head coach at Towson. Finally, another part of this I would look at is they say, hey, you're going to be the boss to some assistant coaches. Look up how many assistant coaches that is. So we go to our Pittsburgh conversation earlier. It's not like it's less work to coach Towson's combined program than it is Pittsburgh. In fact, it might be more work in a lot of these cases for mid-major programs if your facility isn't big enough, which I don't think Towson's is, for the entire team to practice at once. You may be spending as much as twice as much time on the pool deck. And if you're also understaffed, right? If Pittsburgh has 6 coaches and you only have a head coach, a diving coach, and 2 assistant coaches, if you have 2/3 the labor force, I know I'm doing a lot of math here, it's not as much. So you might have 2/3 the labor force to do twice the amount of coaching, right? And that's going to be very impactful on your ability to do all the other things you have to do in the job: recruiting, fundraising, et cetera, or even give people the kind of attention they deserve coaching wise.
Yeah. And suddenly that salary that maybe he took at UVA that was dollars to dollars less is quality of life, and the dollars per hour invested suddenly shifts when you're on an understaffed mid-major program coaching the same number of kids with twice as much work.
All right. I think we've fully examined Towson. I do think it's nice. 22 days off sounds like a lot for a lot of institutional jobs. But let's go to this Danish one that somebody sent me. Now, this is a job posting for Holstebro Swim Club. Anybody needs to know how to spell that. It's Holstebro. It's a swim club in Jutland, which is the peninsula part of Denmark that sticks up from Germany. It's in the kind of the middle piece of Jutland, a fairly sort of significant town by Danish standards, maybe 50,000 people living there. And it's they're going to name a new head coach on August 2022. You have until June to apply. I get a lot of questions. One of the reasons I want to bring this up is I did coach in Denmark for a few years. There's one other American guy, I think, who's over there coaching right now. I think his name is Casey Foley. I don't know anything about him. I've never met him. But I do get that they do have a fair amount of foreign coaches that come into the country. And I'll get into some of the reasons why. Well, number one is that these jobs generally dollar for dollar pay quite well. So this job also says, competitive salary after qualification. So I can't tell you how much it actually is, but I would assume it's actually pretty good. But I just want to sort of go over some pieces of this. And Eric, you're going to be my fact checker for, pieces of going like, hey, that doesn't sound that good. So let's see what they want you to do okay, sorry, before I get into the description, I want to say for Holstebro, probably what would attract people to this position is the fact that it's been a pretty successful club. They've been traditionally putting swimmers on the Danish junior national team, which is sort of the highest you can really get to as a Danish swim club, in a similar way to US club teams, right? So they've done very well. They have a very nice facility. It's an 8-lane, 50-meter pool that they train out of. And not that many swimmers. Your average Danish swim club is probably around 100, 120 competitive swimmers to cycle through that space. So from that perspective, you might be thinking like, wow, this is actually a really great opportunity, pays well, I can be competitively successful, and I can coach in this wonderful facility. There are some caveats to that. One of which being all the facilities in Denmark are public. So you will be sharing that pool with Johnny Cranky Danish. Imagine the crankiest lap swimmer you've met at any pool. They will be very demanding in terms of them being equally represented somehow during the time which you probably want to be practicing with your team. So don't expect that you're just going to have 8 lanes of a 50-meter pool to yourself at any point. Although that is the case in a few unique situations. So let's see what they want you to be responsible for. So you're going to be responsible for training their top group of swimmers. I would estimate, again, that that's probably somewhere between 12 and 20 swimmers in your training group. They have traditionally smaller groups at the top of these clubs. You're going to be responsible for the development of all the competitive swimmers in the club. You can just interrupt me whenever you
sounds standard for a club coach that you would oversee every aspect of the competitive side of the program.
You're going to be responsible for hiring swim coaches in cooperation with your board. And this is where I will introduce to you, for anybody who is thinking about a Danish swim club. Danish swim clubs have the most complex governance structure that I've ever seen. There's boards upon boards upon boards. You're thinking, I'm in an American swim club, we have 5 people. That's our board. Okay. In Denmark, they don't even have 5 people on the committee for t-shirt sizes. Do you know what I mean? Like the subcommittee for shorts with pockets or without pockets. Like, so you're going to have to deal with a multi-layered structure in most cases, where there's actually a sub board for competitive swimming. And then there's a broader club with all sorts of people who are not doing competitive swimming. That's a layer above that. So I would assume in this case, you're doing hiring with the cooperation of your competitive swimming board, but it could be people who don't concern themselves with competitive swimming at all. Eric's making a face. Season planning for all the competitive swimmers in cooperation with your competitive swimming board.
What?
See, I don't think I needed you to fact check, but I need the fresh reaction of some of these responsibilities.
If you have a board that can conceivably look at your season plan and provide
any kind of constructive feedback,
they should be on your staff. Like who's just sitting around that? It's like, are there just former swimmers just
no
all over the place that it's like I watched a swimming video once, therefore I'm on your competitive swim committee?
They will most likely be parents of people that you coach, in much the same way American swimming boards are constructed. They will be.
But what parent wants to or has the time to sit in and get into the weeds on the progression of 10 and unders through your program? Like, why?
There's a strong culture of volunteerism in the country. People have flexible work schedules, Eric. There are parents that very much would like to be involved in your decision-making process, even if they don't know anything about it.
That sounds terrible. I don't know if the salary's enough. Whatever it is.
Let's see what else you've got. Strong. Now I'm realizing English is my second language, and some of these things I don't know how to say. Sparring. If I say sparring, like, you and another coach talking about swimming and bouncing ideas off of each other. You're responsible for doing that with your assistant coaches.
Okay. So you're responsible for educating your staff and engaging them in swimming debate.
Education would assume that you're the most knowledgeable one, but this is an egalitarian society, Eric. So everybody's opinion matters. So,
right.
You've got to meet your assistant coaches almost as equals in terms of.
Is the same expectation that you have with your assistants you have with the competitive board? Because I feel like it's more important to be like you're going to spend more time educating your competitive board than you are your coaches, just so they don't get in the way of whatever it is you're trying to do.
At some point, this would be a good time to introduce the concepts of Yanta's law. Anybody who wants to look up Yanta's law will explain a lot of this. It's a fictional concept in Scandinavian literature, where essentially what Yanta's law comes down to is this set of precepts that's like, you're not smarter than anyone else, you're not special, you don't have any special knowledge, there's nothing about you that's better than anybody else. So
then how do you actually advertise for a job where,
yes, what makes you the head coach then?
You're a specialist.
Then, yeah, I don't, unclear, right? Let's see. You need to plan training trips with the board. Of course, you can't do that on your own. You should take part in development work, implementing of strategies, the politics of your internal club, and other organizational plans.
Oh,
I'm just gonna read the rest of these off. You can just give your sound. You need to take part in cooperation with an organization in the community that develops programs for elite athletes, whatever that is within sort of a communal organization. You need to show up to the meets and the training camps, and you need to be able to promote the best swimmers to be role models within the club and the youngest swimmers. Here's who they're looking for. Somebody with a relevant swimming related education and experience that matches with the club's sporting ambitions. You are somebody that has a focus on the whole person and is a motivating and positive figure. You can step in constructively with your coaching team and be a team player, but also can work independently and structured and take independent decisions. You have a focus.
You're the oversight of the board.
Right. You have a focus on the club's values and visions. You also want to work, some of these seem like responsibilities too, want to work to connect the competitive part of the club to the swimming school. You're dedicated, motivated, and some other stuff. What do they offer? The 50-meter pool I mentioned. Good opportunities for talent development. Funding for ongoing education. Says large freedom to develop the club's future strategy. A coaching team that is going to give you some of that good sparring. You've got these organizations that will cooperate with you. Can't speak to what that actually is. There's a word I can't translate. Like a good listening board. They're good at listening. Whatever.
The one that wants to make the decisions.
No, they just want to be a part of the decisions. Good work-life balance is what they're offering. And they would like you to work there for the long term because they value continuity and sort of a long looking strategy. It's a full-time job. You get paid based on your qualifications. You work at their swim center. So I don't know. I think a lot of that stuff, in fairness, I feel like we've been so hard on these, everybody's job posting, and maybe that's because they deserve it. But, some of that stuff I read at the end, like, that's nice, right?
Yeah. It's promising, whether or not that happens is to be seen. I can only imagine, based on the country that I currently reside in, that there's probably, it seems to be that they would be more honest when it comes to talking about a life balance situation versus
I had very poor work-life balance when I worked over there, but maybe that's not representative. I do get the sense that is changing, and it's something that I was expecting in going to work over there. I thought, oh, well, this is Denmark. Like, they're obviously going to be a bit more civilized about the work-life balance thing. And then I didn't encounter that. And maybe some of that had to do with me, but like when I was there last summer, I met up with a coach because I had my first kid and I basically essentially did not get paternity leave, which is a normal thing to get in Scandinavian countries. And again, that's like, I'm saying that in the context of there's probably a million swim coaches in America who go like, paternity leave? Are you kidding? Just understand that most parents in Scandinavian countries, male parents, can get some paid leave, fully paid time off from work. I did not get that. You have to negotiate that into your own contract. But I talked to somebody last summer who had gotten a job, and he's like, yeah, and I got 6 months paternity leave. And I go like, are you planning on having kids? He's like, no, just in case. And I was like, okay, well, good for you, man. So I think people are doing it, but we talk about, if we bring it all the way back, to the beginning, in this oral history stuff, basically it's taken coaches semi-organizing. There's no formal union or anything, but just sort of being like, hey, here's what I did in my contract negotiation. You should do this next time. Yeah. You should also ask for this because you can get it. And that sort of raised some of that standard a little bit. I wouldn't know how relevant it would be to this position.
It's interesting just to listen to you try to translate this job posting and just hearing what it is relative to where things are here. Because it is, I don't know if do they list any kind of organizations you need to be a part of, because around here, for whatever reason, people think it's great to list that you're a part of ASCA. Mm-hmm. Now that certainly is changing with the people who were in charge of ASCA. Hopefully things are going to be in a way that posting that isn't going to make the rest of us, want to vomit. But I mean, what does it look like over there? Are there educational systems that they expect you to be a part of, or is it just, if you get to it, you get to it?
Yeah, there are. And when I bring up that, they've got in there that you can do some ongoing education, they do have basically actual coaching certification courses that are run. I don't actually know the organization that runs them because I didn't do them while I was there. So they probably haven't put them on here because they may not want to limit themselves to Danish coaches who almost always would have done some form of this. But if you're foreign, you probably have done none of it, right? Because it's very much internal courses in Danish. My impression from other people that did them was that the quality level was actually pretty high on some of these, especially with concepts like physiology and, training systems and all that stuff. They're pretty strong in that one. I heard some parts of the psychology education. I wasn't overly impressed with that part of it. But it's something very specific and relevant, and I would guess of higher quality than what we're getting via ASCA.
If you were entertaining a conversation with an American coach who were interested in this position, what are some of the things that you would want to make sure they were aware of when it comes to the differences between coaching an American club versus coaching a Danish club? Like, looking specifically as I mean, you've talked about it in the past when it comes to competitions, and the level of kid might be the national junior team there, right. But here they would be making juniors. So right. I guess
I would say that's actually a pretty good analog, though. If you look at one of these teams and you say they're putting people on a European junior team, national junior team, pretty close to USA Swimming summer junior qualification. Those things are not perfect, but fairly comparable. I would say, expect to work in a much less hierarchical system than you do in the US. And I think you could hear that in the job application a little bit. All these times when you're expected to cooperate, they really mean that. And that can be a hard adjustment. It was a hard adjustment for me, and I thought that I wanted it, in the form, but when I saw the reality of it, it wasn't exactly what I wanted. I think that if I got another opportunity to do it, I probably would be more prepared and do a bit better job, just knowing what I was getting into. But like, you will have, some know-it-all 22-year-old who's a part-time coach with your youngest kids, who will just sort of walk up to you and go, "What are you doing at practice?" And you go, "This." And he goes, "Well, that's stupid. Why are you doing that?" And like, you're not allowed to go like, "Hey, shithead, don't talk to me." Like, that's not culturally, that's not how it works. Or, even down to the swimmers will be much more open and direct with you about what they think about what you're doing. And that can be a strength for sure, because you can get them to engage a bit more, because of that sort of level of discourse. But it can also be a really hard transition, because I think a lot of our coaching systems in the US are very hierarchical, like whoever's in charge says what happens, and that's what everybody's supposed to do. And there's very formal ways. I mean, like, I would say teams, it's not like everything goes, but like, there's still like some formality around, like, hey, if you disagree with the boss, here's how you should disagree. And just a lot of that is not there. You're just allowed to do it openly whenever you feel like it. And I think managing the politics of it is incredibly underrated. If you listen to that stuff with the political structure and the boards and all the volunteers that are involved, it's hugely important. And if you're a bad politician, you won't last very long. Take it from me. Take it from somebody who didn't last very long, right? Because I didn't understand the politics of what I was doing. And so I found myself at the end of things completely politically outmaneuvered. The last thing I would say to a foreign coach who's looking at something like this is, if you're from the US, if you're not from an EU country, immigration wise, it's very easy to get there. If you're from the US, the immigration system will be brutal, and no one will know how to help you with it. So you might need to call me. If you're an American coach and you actually apply to one of these jobs and get it, just go ahead and call me and I'll help you as best I can.
Maybe I should set that email up pretty soon.
Yeah, so set that email up so those people can get in contact with me, just in case they listen to this and actually get interested. It's just, it's a lot of hoops to jump through. There's a duality where everybody expects that you know what to do, and nobody actually knows what nobody knows what to do to tell you, because they've never engaged. If you're an average Danish person, you've never engaged with the immigration system. Much like here in the US, I don't really know how immigration works to the US. I just grew up with a US citizenship. I mean, the only experiences I have through my mom, who's not an American citizen for her life, but she always had a green card. So then that still was fairly straightforward at that point, married to my dad, US citizen kind of thing. But I think for, if you're just a single person that's going over to do this, or even if you're in a family, it gets even more complicated. So there's a lot to consider. All right. I think that's all we have for this week. So we're going to wrap it up there. Eric, you got any bonus stuff you want to throw out there at the end?
Maybe.
Okay, but I'm not going to stop recording then, because I'm just going to keep it all on the same recording stuff. That's the formal end of our podcast. And now we're just going to pretend I stopped recording and that we're done and we're relaxing. We're in here. Cut. I watched The Batman yesterday on HBO Max. Have you seen The Batman?
Like,
with Robert Pattinson as Batman?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it was all right. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I almost fell asleep
like
at one
darker
point.
and deeper. And
got even darker.
Can you even understand what he's saying? Because, back when it was Michael Keaton, it was like full pronunciation and enunciation. Right. I understood. Yeah. And by the time we got to Christian Bale, it was like somebody was gargling with gravel.
He is enunciating better than Bale, but I would say the movie is even darker than any of the Bale movies. It seems they've found a way to I listened to a podcast on it. I guess they filmed in Edinburgh, Scotland, instead of Chicago. So, like all the streets are tiny and narrow and everything's dark and dreary at all times. And so if that's not what you're into, I wouldn't recommend seeing The Batman with Robert Pattinson. Colin Farrell is in it, completely unrecognizable in prosthetics. I heard that he was in it, and then I was going like, when are they going to have Colin Farrell's character in this movie? And then afterwards I was like, oh. So I'm always down for a Colin Farrell jam. I like Robert Pattinson. I like Jeffrey Wright, who's in there as Inspector Gordon. So
how would you rate this in terms of where it sits of your favorite Batman renditions?
I would say I'm with a lot of people. Dark Knight is my number one Batman movie. And my number two would probably be Batman Begins. And this would be third. I would say it's better than Dark Knight Rises. And better than any of the Burton or Schumacher Batmans.
Yeah.
But I don't remember those two very favorably, Yeah.
I mean, I grew up with a VHS copy of the original with
the 89 Keaton Batman.
Yeah. So it's really difficult because that was my Batman.
And that movie, to be fair, is probably would be my fourth one, because I think they got worse after that one. But that one was like,
there was some really bad stuff that was going on where it was like, you're having Jim Carrey in essence is like carrying the movie as the Riddler, and then you're left with all these other things that are happening, and the costumes and the changes, and Heath Ledger really stands out to me within
to most people
that as the Joker. Yeah. I mean, it's just that's where his portrayal of the Joker was fantastic. I'd be curious. I will see this one at some point. It's just difficult because it's like Heath Ledger, just that performance really puts that movie up there for me, and then the original because with nostalgia. But I will say Danny DeVito's Penguin was wonderfully grotesque in every way possible. It was so gross, but so good. He does such a fantastic job of being disgusting in that role. And it's exactly what you would expect to happen with a character like Penguin. Like it would be very animalistic.
So Colin Farrell plays Penguin in this movie. And I dare you to look up an image of Penguin from the Batman and try to recognize Colin Farrell.
You'd have. Yeah, I guess
it looks like they just. I just thought I saw him and I just said like, oh, this is some character actor. I'm sure I've seen him before, and he's just nailing this version of the Penguin, which is completely different from the Danny DeVito version. It's very much more like, what if the Penguin was essentially just a normal guy? And not a fish-eating weirdo that lived in the sewers. Yeah. Spoilers for whatever Batman movie Danny DeVito's Penguin was in 25 years ago. He's a fish-eating weirdo that lives in the sewers. Okay.
That's good stuff. No, I mean, that's, I'm trying to think the last time I actually saw a movie. I can't even really remember. I haven't been watching a lot of TV. I've been doing the YouTubes, just catching more like documentary style information.
More cooking documentaries on YouTube.
Yeah, more or less. Just
they know what you want
stuff
over there at YouTube Inc.
Yeah, they got me on lockdown on their algorithm. So, but we have World's Trials starting tomorrow.
Oh yeah, that thing.
I don't think we need to necessarily get too far into that, but World Trials starts tomorrow.
Yeah, and I'm really excited here. I mean, Wahoo's wise, we've got 2 swimmers, I think, who have a legitimate chance to make the junior Pan Pac team, and I think that's great. I'm excited to watch that. But I did get a text earlier today from somebody that was basically like, is USA Swimming even acknowledging that they're holding a trials meet? Like they've made absolutely no effort to hype this meet at all. It almost like, to me, seems like they're embarrassed that they put it at the wrong time. And so they're just kind of like hoping that nobody notices that they held a trials meet now, because they don't like the attention from it. But it's so weird. And
I got an internal communication about it today.
And you were sort of like, oh yeah.
Well, I mean, it was just, in the sense that it shared like what stations it was going to be on. And it didn't even dawn on me that it might even actually be on TV, because again, there's not a lot that's being put into it. Although which is funny because there are a lot of compelling situations and stories in this trials, considering who's just turned pro, what pros have just moved, what pros aren't there, and what that does to some of the events in the depth. So, when we get around to getting Joel out of Hawaii after his coffee research, and then navigating the Juka articles, what does Worlds look like? There's so much stuff going on. I know I sounded like I bashed him, but is Carson Foster going to put together a good finals race?
There we go.
The prelims are going to be there, but are the finals going to be there?
Carson, we just want you to know that Eric Wyken's views don't represent the views of the Swim Brief podcast. We think you're doing great. Okay. Eric is just somehow fixated. It's probably because he's no Shane Casas. That's true. That's your main problem with Carson Foster.
That's true. This is his first big meet after his quote unquote disappointing trials and the somewhat disappointing run up to trials. So it'd be interesting to see how he does. We gotta whether or not Kitty Ledecky is she gonna just coast through this. Like, what's Coach Nesty's plan for her going into this? Like, she's just gonna do like a quick 5K and then walk up to the blocks, and then that'd probably put her in the best place to perform too, if we just went straight from a practice right into the race. I go 400. So don't want to get too much into Worlds. I'm gonna end up with a 2-hour podcast. So
you got some sniffles over there though?
My allergies are kicking my butt. Sorry, I tried to mute. I tried to mute during this podcast because I knew I had some work I had to do, and I didn't want the screen to come over to me, and I'm like wiping across my face or whatever. Was outside a little bit on Friday. It's been really windy here in Texas, and air quality is decent, but when it's constantly pushing everything through the air as it has been, it's been a bit tough. So
all right, just checking.
I'm doing all right. It's
just making sure you don't have BA5. You already had BA2 or whatever.
Yeah, so whatever I had in January. Right. So hopefully my Wi-Fi is still strong here over the next few months before I get my second boost.
Yeah. Well, you're still noticing the better signal. For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
You just have to wait until your signal strength goes down, and then
if I have to
go
keep resetting, if I have to keep restarting the router, then I know it's time.
Right. All right, everybody, that's it for this week. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.